Good morning. I'd like to call the facility committee meeting to order. It is October 9th, noting that all board members are here as well as John and Dr. Brown. And I need a motion to approve the.
So moved. Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I've received no public comment. Our first item is to follow up on the contingency factor for Hill Elementary School.
Rebecca, would you mind pulling out the document, please? Then we can go to the very end. Okay, so you're familiar with seeing this document on a monthly basis. The column that has the 2.5 million is considered the construction manager or Vogel's contingency that they've managed for items that have come up throughout the project. The number to the far right was considered the owner's contingency. And just as a reminder, that came from value engineering that the board approved way back at the beginning of the project. So you can see the two of them together are about $2.8 million. Allie and I met with Vogel yesterday, and this is 99.9% done. There is one very minor wall graphic issue they're working through at one of the schools to try to improve the way that presents to students in the building. That's a small item, and then they're going to close off this document and basically work with the district. They call the term a deductive change order, where in effect they write to Dr. Brown a negative change order and return the funds to the district. The other thing that Vogel wanted us to communicate today, Allie and I met with them for a while yesterday. They're also reconciling the project allowances. The project allowances will provide additional savings back to the district, and they will present information to you as a board so you know where that's coming from. A really good example of that is in the project, just like at the middle school, there are allowances for things like winter heat. And so obviously as the project is being built, they'll bring in temporary heat to heat the facility as it's being built. They have allowances in the construction budget to fund that. But at the end of the project, they go through and actually reconcile the bills against the allowance. And then we'll be presenting to you an accounting of how all of that lines up. So that will result in additional savings. The other thing to keep in mind, besides the allowances, is the board selected subcontractors in advance of the project. So North American Mechanical was an example, Westfall was an example, Cooper was an example. Those subs provided, I'll call it a smaller version of a guaranteed maximum price to Vogel within the larger project. They're also reconciling their work for savings and are presenting that to Vogel. So Vogel has asked for time through around the Thanksgiving break to complete all reconciliation for Heritage. They would like to come to a December committee meeting and present to you the total scope of savings at Heritage, and then eventually present a deductive change order. So it's very positive discussion going on right now. I would say Vogel is a fully transparent partner of ours that are going through and identifying all of those savings for us. And then ultimately, Allie and I asked them to present that in a format to the board. So you would be able to see that as well. So we probably won't come back to Heritage until December, when the intent would be to basically try to close this. The one thing I just want you to keep your eyes on the dollar amount here, because when we talk about the federal direct pay program in a little bit, ultimately, if the board proceeds with that, a funding source has to go along with it. So obviously this is an option, but we'll also talk about the middle school as an option in just a minute. But at a minimum, Heritage will have a deductive change order of $2.8 million under the contingency part of the budget. But then just know there's more savings coming under the allowances and the subcontractor component as well. And you'll see the total picture in December.
Steve, one of the things we talked about is just the transportation out of that site. It seems like another entrance, which would kind of clean up that whole area. And again, I think you indicated that the village doesn't mind if we put another exit or entrance there. Have you investigated or looked into how much does that cost to implement that change?
Yeah, so thanks for bringing that up. So we did, Allie and I just talked about that yesterday with Vogel so first of all, Vogel's preference would be to give all of the funds back to us and kind of close out Heritage. If the board were to decide, let's say next summer, you wanted to punch that road through, we would have the funds on our side to then contract for that project. So we would want to keep that in the back of our minds as that change order comes through to Dr. Brown. Does the committee want us to set aside a dollar amount? The initial reaction from Vogel is kind of a high level estimate is around $250,000. We do have the drawings done. So we know where the road would go. Roxanne Johnson has already vetted it. She's communicated it with the village. They've indicated that they would be willing to review it. It's just a matter of us living on that site to really determine whether or not that would be helpful. As Dr. Brown said, we put signs everywhere up there. We added some additional in and out lanes, and so far it has been very clear to parents what the traffic flow is, and I think we've gotten a pretty good pattern. That doesn't mean that it can't be improved, and we could look at it. So ultimately, as a committee, once that deductive change order comes back, you will be able to decide, do you want to just park some money over here to the side and just keep watching what's happening there?
I guess in my opinion, it would be better if you had that punched through, that people are getting in the groove. But I think it would just be a cleanup.
But is there any thought from the village as that develops on site? Will there be any in and out to our property from the rear end, the south side?
Right. So right now, the way that is set up is from a legal perspective, the expense of that said road would be a developer cost. So like when the board purchased that land 25 plus years ago, there is a very small section on the western end of our property that is a right of way to get to the development behind it. However, the developer would have to pay to punch that road through. And right now, there are entrances throughout the entire subdivision that have been approved by the village. If you're driving down Woodland and you see the one basically pretty close to the crosswalk location, it's a little bit before it. Right now, that is the main entrance into the subdivision. So currently, there's not a plan to put that road in, but if it ever was, it wouldn't be at district expense based on the legal agreement from years ago. And to your point, Jack, if there's interest in pursuing that, Dr. Brown and I can bring that back to the forefront. We can Because we would want to get those discussions going with the village. We'd want to get that approval ready, because that would take several months. What that would do is it would create two separate loops. So like the intermediate school loop would be its own, and the heritage would be its own, because you'd have two roads punching through to Woodland. So like if that was an interest of the board, if you feel like that's maybe a better long-term setup, what we would do, we would just keep the engineering moving. It's been completed, and it was just an initial inquiry with the village. We haven't done anything other than that, so we would want to kind of get that going again, get that process moving, so we could do that.
Steve, on the west side, you say there's an easement
Yeah.
owned by the developer. Is that developer attorney or somebody else?
Originally, it wasn't. It was for so the property owner that sold the district the site also owned the 40 acres behind our site. And at one point, the school board held the right to purchase the 40 acres behind. Once the high school referendum there failed for the third time, the board let that go, that right to buy the other 40 acres. So it reverted to the original owner of the property. But when the original owner of the property sold to the Tierneys, the right for that easement shifted to the new owner. So whoever owns the back acres of the 40 is the one who has the legal right for that easement. But it was not originally the Tierneys.
But is the easement for utilities for a road?
It's a road. Yep, it would be a road. But as of right now, that road has not been, that's not being
Put gravel on, right?
right, yes, exactly, yep.
But it's not owned or part of that development.
It's not, there, if you look at the plans for the development, there's not a road coming in to feed those homes. It actually comes in two spots off of Woodland, basically to the east of my property.
So it would be a good idea to have two loops.
I agree.
And,
Yeah.
you know, I think, what we should do is just kind of
Keep
keep
that going.
the, ball moving, and just make that. Because I think we've had some, communication, some challenges just before we had the job.
Yeah, so absolutely. Based on that feedback, Dr. Brown and I will let EUA and Roxanne Johnson know that there's interest in at least keeping that conversation moving forward and taking the next steps, which will get that going.
Okay, moving on to the middle school and middle school contingency traffic.
Okay, so Rebecca, thank you for bringing that up. If you want to make that just a little bit bigger. Okay, so again, we have the construction management contingency and the owner contingency. So similar process to Heritage, the owner contingency was created by value engineering change orders approved or changes approved by the board. The construction management contingency is for issues that come up during construction. You know that there have already been a few with like the abatement and the demolition of the existing site. There are some that are pending that are continuing to be evaluated and worked through. Vogel is taking a very close look at some of the infrastructure of the school, the electrical, the plumbing. As an example, they're working right now with Jeff Keenis, the middle school principal, and making sure the floor electrical is in the right places to serve like the tech ed area, family consumer ed, et cetera. So Jeff is really taking a deep dive into that because once the floor is poured, we don't want to be going back and doing anything there. So all of those like very, very detailed infrastructure things are getting like a double and triple check right now. As we're starting to get into that phase of the project. You would see between the construction management contingency and the owner's contingency, balance, between the two at about 4.4 million. Please note that one option, as we discuss whether or not the board is interested in the investment regarding the Inflation Reduction Act, the board could choose to use the owner contingency for the middle school to fund that effort. Given that the board chose those savings as well earlier on in the project, that would be an option. Another option certainly would be the fact that we're going to be getting a deductive change order on Heritage. That's another option. So I just wanted to point that out to you before we get to that other agenda item, that ultimately in the end, the board has several options available to you if you want to pursue that. The middle school project is going very well. Dr. Brown, myself, Allie, John, Rick Franz, middle school admin, we all participate in on-site meetings that are going on every 2 weeks. We go over site safety, we go over schedule, we go over potential change orders. We take a pretty deep dive every 2 weeks into what's happening. One thing that came up during our last meeting was if there was an interest in the board having a site visit. We wanted to just get your feedback on that. Right now, there's not a lot to look at, but some walls are starting to go up. I do know at Heritage, we did have a board walk through after quite a few of the walls were up and the roof was starting to get put on. But one question we had for you is, would there be an interest in a board visit this fall? Or would you prefer to wait until the spring when the structure is becoming more clear? So either way, I mean.
I can go either way, but you know, it's pretty visible from the road. I think. Personally, I'd wait till,
Concrete floor.
yeah, I'd wait till there was a little more to see.
Sure, wait till more of the structure is there and the roofs are completed, and maybe look at it more.
And it's warmer, you know, let's wait till it's got some heat.
That sounds good. Any questions at
So
all?
they have the footings and
Yeah,
are they starting to?
Yeah.
There's Yeah, the walls are starting to go up. So if you were to drive by the south end of the property, as we were there 2 weeks ago, was starting to have some of the walls go up.
so on the north end closest to the church, that's where the gymnasium is. That looks like it's like 8 feet in the ground, one more. Is that
Yep.
correct?
Partially, under that level.
Yeah, there's a lot down.
If there aren't any questions, we can jump to the next agenda item.
Sure. The Inflation Reduction Act.
Yep, so underneath the middle school, we've put this on the agenda for both budget committee and facility. What we're wanting to make sure is that as a board member, if there's something that you want us to provide to you by next Monday, we can get it to you. Obviously, you had the opportunity to spend time with our legal counsel on this issue at the last board meeting. We did have a budget committee member ask for us to include information on our investment to date, both legal and accounting wise with Whitley. So we will add that into the packet for Monday night. The two general paths on this one are we could go after a 6% reimbursement for the middle school with very little added costs. And so you'd be able to take 6% of the 14 million to have an idea of what that would be. Or if we choose to meet what's called the prevailing wage requirements and the apprenticeship requirements, which carry about a $1.1 million investment. we would be able to go up to the 27% range if we don't meet what's called domestic content requirements, or 30% if we do. But it would be in the 27 to 30% range with prevailing wage. This is becoming more critical for us to make a decision on, and I'll explain why. The original plan for our geothermal drillers was that they were coming in the spring. They are now available, and so Vogel is grabbing them and is scheduling them for November. So they have a lot of work to do to clear off some of the area in the back so that they can actually drill the geothermal wells. But the decision that Vogel made was to grab them while they're here in Wisconsin and get them going. They are a key component of this 1.1 million. Because their bid for the job did not include prevailing wage. In fact, they're not from Wisconsin. Most geothermal projects of this size, this is one of the firms that travels nationally to do this work, and they're out of South Dakota. So they're paying different wages than what we would be paying for construction work in Wisconsin. And they're definitely not paying prevailing wages. So a big part of the investment is that group that will be coming next month.
Steve, I guess the question, we have more than one bidder. And these guys wanted, because they do prevailing wage. Did the other, was the competitor bidding prevailing wage? Do you know? Or?
I do not know, but I will get that answer for you. I do know that there are very few firms that are doing this and that are available, but I don't know the answer to that, and I will get that for you.
Steve, is the timing of the reimbursement the same whether we do the 6%, the 27 to 30%, it's still when the project is completely done?
Yep. And so if there's anything that you think of, reach out to Allie or myself. We want to make sure we've got whatever information you want in front of you by next Monday night so that you can weigh in on it. The other thing to be thinking about is board members. If you do want to go down the rate of the 27 to 30% reimbursement, we would want the motion to include your thought process for the funding, either Heritage out of the deductive change order or the middle school owner's contingency. Those would be the two most logical options at this point. All right. Next topic is high school. If you wouldn't mind bringing that up, Rebecca, in Bethel Circle. Okay, so very similar situation to Heritage in that Vogel would like to complete the reconciliation process for the high school project in Bethel Circle and present that to you as a board in December. So as of right now, you can see the columns that have the construction management contingency and the owner's contingency. The other thing to keep in mind, I just don't want, obviously this would be easy to lose track of, but 6-8 months ago, the board made the call to remove portions of that work. Remember the older part of the school, some of the flooring that was going to be done, lighting, ceiling, etc., was removed. So that's still off to the side. So just keep in mind that that money is still off to the side. We didn't spend it. We didn't do the work. This is for the work that we did do. And so you would see, obviously the dollar amounts are much smaller, but Vogel's intention is to come back in December, have the reconciliation complete. There's the same type of process here as there is for Heritage. So there's GMPs for the subcontractors like Westfall, Navi. There's allowances for work. There's also, if you remember, we pulled the work out and then Vogel was putting maps together on what we were gonna do and what we weren't gonna do. There were some additional savings as they finalized that completion of what was gonna be done and not done. They're gonna share all that with you in December. We would intend to hold on this topic and bring it back in early December, just like Heritage, so you can see the final reconciliation.
Steve, the one support out there that has the cone on top, is that?
Oh.
light?
That's a light.
And is that light, I mean, we purchased that light, but it's just not available?
The original one was damaged by construction vehicles.
Okay,
so
but
they-
that's in this
That's coming.
bid, so
coming.
still, that light is coming. What about the electric charger, which we didn't do, but where is that?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks for bringing that up. So I did bring that up with the policy committee on Monday morning. So at Heritage, we purchased both the infrastructure and the equipment. So if you were to go out to Heritage and park in one of those two spots, you'll actually see the equipment's there. Here at Bethel, if you can recall, the budget was getting very, very close to the referendum allocated amount. And we put in the infrastructure, but we didn't purchase the equipment. So one item that would still be out there when you look at this reconciliation in December would be a decision that you could make as to whether or not you wanted to take like that remaining amount of owner's contingency or whatever, the savings from the high school and actually purchase the equipment. But that is not part of right now here in Bethel. And what we brought up with the policy committee as well, just to share with the facility committee, is we feel we need a policy in place before we actually turn the equipment on at Heritage. Some of the questions for ultimately the board to think about. It's definitely a facility related question. There's a financial related question. But whether or not you want the equipment to be searchable on the national grid, so to speak. And if it's searchable on the national grid, we just are going to have to ultimately explain to community members, why is there someone at Heritage, at 10 at night on a Friday night, about the neighbors wondering why are there people over there?
I guess, when you sit down and take a look at it, the district is paying for the electric and use of that. And I guess the question I've got is, let's say you get two of these chargers, and you got 4 people with solar or electric cars. How do you divvy it out that you get it and I don't? Is it first come, first served? Is it, it just, and it's, public dollars, going to supporting that. If I drive here or if we drive here, it's, we pay for our own gas.
Yep. So let me just take the financial part and John will talk about because John's done most of the work on this. There are multiple approaches that organizations take to charging stations. One approach, some organizations provide their staff with an incentive to go green to be able to charge their vehicles at no cost. Now, it costs the organization. Right. So there are some organizations that do that. There are some organizations that pass on the cost as an actual cost. So there's no profit, so to speak. It's if we pay X per cost of electrical, the person charging it's just going to pay that cost. It's just available to them. It would be on a credit card system. But then there's also the ability to build in a margin. So like there is an ability, like if we put it on the community grid for the board to say, okay, we'll do that, but we're only going to do that by building in a margin or a profit, or otherwise we're not going to do it. So those are the kind of things that John has been exploring and diving into that we haven't presented to you yet. We would ultimately need to be able to present to you the options.
Right.
And then ultimately as a board, we believe that creating a policy first is important before we turn these things on.
And I totally agree with that. Are these high-speed chargers or do I have to, leave my car?
So they're level 2 chargers. So they're not the superchargers, they're simple level 2 chargers. And there are 4 in the parking lot of Heritage, 4 cords or 4 electric vehicles can charge from the 2 posts, just posts.
Then it's for multiple vehicles, if you have Tesla or Ford or everybody uses it. Is there a standard plug?
It's not the Tesla, it's there with the electric vehicles, there's really 2 standards. There's Tesla and there's everybody else. So it's the everybody else model, which I do believe there's a Tesla converter. I don't know, I haven't researched whether a Tesla can convert from the stations we have, but I think it is possible. So there are 4 in the parking lot of Heritage and there are 2 in the service area back of Heritage, 2 connections for our future service vehicles, should we go that way. As far as limiting who can access and the amount of charge time they can use, the charge point system allows, like you guys discovered, either an app or a card to act like a fob to activate who you are. So maybe my maintenance vehicle would be free of charge, but your EV would just be at cost, for example. That can be identified on you as the user. And then secondly, we can limit the amount of time that charging is actually being provided through either turning it off when their vehicle's full or turning it off at 2 hours or another type of method to say you get 2 hours of charge and if you don't remove your vehicle, then it starts charging you 30 cents per kilowatt hour, or really that's the only method we have. If they don't come and unplug it, it will start. One option is to charge them.
Yeah, I guess if I'm a teacher, I got an electric vehicle, I'm sitting here in my class, plug my vehicle in at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I get here, and now, I'm teaching all day, and I've got meetings and all this other stuff, and I'm not moving my vehicle, and I've got teacher 2 or teacher 9,
In line.
What's the rotation of the question? What does that look?
It just creates, challenges.
Yeah, so like Steve said, those would be some of the items we'd have to work out in the policy.
Right.
In regards to the amount of time that a person gets to charge and what the rate would be if that. Very important, for example.
But I do agree with the policy.
John asked at a policy meeting this, do you know the life of these chargers? Do they?
It's like
do
an
they have a life
electric,
cycle?
it's like an electrical outlet, basically, so I'm not really sure of the life cycle on it. It's outside, so the screens would probably wear first. It might be difficult to read, like you probably experience at the gas station, like what that say on your gas pump or any other outdoor screen.
I mean, looking up along the maintenance of it, you have to be replacing things on it.
Probably
Like-
replacing screens and the equipment that actually moves the mechanical equipment.
We can ask them now as part of our follow-up, Ted, just what would be the maintenance costs expected, because that probably plays into whether or not you would want to charge a margin, like for community use, and maybe set the funds aside, for equipment replacement.
I'm not sure you really want community use on it, when you talk about school safety and so forth, does that raise an issue, with sprays?
I mean,
So if we're gonna do this, it's for our employees. And, I would look at this just like our food service, we make a small margin on it so that we can replace equipment over time. And this, I would probably say it's the same way.
Right, sounds good. So I don't have anything else on the high school or Bethel. And then Rebecca, if you wouldn't mind bouncing back. So the last agenda item, first of all, could you please bring up the tracker, the first document? Then if you wouldn't mind just focusing on the top part. So I want to explain what has been updated since the September board meeting. So at the September board meeting, as you recall, the board approved allocation of Fund 10 maintenance cost of Fund 49. So Ally and I have updated this document with the most currently available interest earning information. And then at the very bottom of the document, we added the decision that the board made in September. And so the net result of that is in the box. That as of right now, there would be $527,000 in funds available for district-wide capital maintenance projects. We will be asking this committee in conjunction with the deductive change order from Heritage in December. What would you like to do with the remaining funds at Heritage? So this discussion will continue into December. We've talked about at a high level what those options are: reducing the Fund 39 tax levy, not borrowing the full amount of the $175 million, allocating some of it towards district-wide maintenance. So we'll want to come back to that discussion. But as of right now, it's about $527,000 pending the discussion on closing out Heritage. And so just keep that figure in mind as Rebecca bounces out of here and gets us to the capital project request list. If you wouldn't mind bringing that up, Rebecca.
Hey, a quick question here.
Yep.
You know, all of these funds that we've been talking about is, you know, can only be used for maintenance, or they can't be used for anything else.
Right, so any of the funds, that's a good point to clarify for any community that might be watching, is the funds related to the November 2022 referendum can legally only be used for the question itself. And so the question itself included the new Heritage, the new middle school, Bethel Circle remodeling, targeted work at the high school, and then district-wide capital maintenance. So that's the limit of what these funds could be available for. But obviously, as you know, as board members, the district-wide capital maintenance, you've seen the long-term plan that has quite a few items on it. So there's more items on it than funds that would become available. But we do want to circle back to those 3 different pathways that would be available for those heritage funds. But we think it'd be a better discussion once Vogel actually presents the final numbers to you. So what you see in front of you today, so our last item for this meeting, we are bringing forward $144,000 worth of items for consideration. If approved, these items would go against the $572,000 that you just saw that were funds that were available. So what you see on this list, there is one pretty big project. John knows a lot about it if you have questions. So in the high school field house, there's a lighting project here to basically modernize the approach that we're taking in the high school field house to these zones. So if someone built a brand new field house today, they would want to turn on like the courts, but not the sides, or they might want to turn on the sides, but not the courts. And if you've been in there, you've seen what the impact is of like a flashing light that goes out, especially like in the middle of a game, what happens when that occurs. This is just a different approach to what would happen. John brought this up based on what he's been seeing occurring in the high school field house. Do you want to touch on it about that?
Sure. So the original lighting was replaced right about when I was coming into the district about 5 years ago. And at that time, of course, the LED technology was still kind of in its infancy, but progressing rapidly. The costs were a little more expensive then. So since then, costs have come down and technology quality has gone up. And according to our district electrician, I think Mike's replaced about, I would guess 25% of those lights, and Scott may be able to append that number, but
Easily.
yeah, so 20, 25, 30% of those lights have gone bad or started flickering and had to be replaced. So part of that concern is definitely during sporting events. So this would be to not only rezone, but to put the newer, hopefully higher quality lighting into that field house and then extend the life of those lights in that part of the building.
And then
They're failing at a rapid rate.
in addition to that, you do see some.
So just, touching on that, if we replace these, is there an expected, life? Like you go to the hardware store and it says you get a 5-year.
You get this much.
Yes, you get a 5-year, useful life out of this thing. Is that the same on commercial or?
So I'd have to dig up the original project, again, before I came in and see what the original life expectancy was on the current product, because I don't know what that is currently. And then, of course, going forward with Westfall, we should have an understanding of what the life expectancy would be on a new product. And again, Scott, I have a better number, but it should be a 10-year product.
I think
Over a
that
5-year period, over 25% of these things have failed. What's the cost?
Yeah, because that's a big part of when you're putting it in, that's the big selling point, that's gonna last this long and you're not gonna have those replacement costs.
Yeah, should we go back to the old ones because, the life cycle costs of these things are more than,
When we were in discussion with these lights, they were supposed to last a lot longer than they have been. I know Westfall has said they have used these in other projects around us, and they are failing at the rapid rate they are here. And it's just a bad product. I don't, like John said, they were in their infancy, first of all, so things have improved a lot since then. But yeah, Mike is changing out 1 or 2 of these, it seems, a week or every couple weeks. And if it happens right before a game, we're in trouble.
So I think, is there any recourse?
So typically with products like these, it's a 1-year warranty. And so again, I can dig up the original product, Jack, but I'm sure that's come and gone. And then they'll say the life expectancy is 10 years, but it won't be. They'll give a 1-year warranty on it. So I can dig that information a bit if you guys want to see that.
Yeah, I'd like to know a little bit more about that. 'Cause
Yeah, it just seems
how you
crazy.
sell and have this selling point, and then you don't have to meet those expectations at all. It's for sure.
Yeah, it would be interesting to understand whether the districts, if they're some type of class action, that we can,
So with that conversation, Jen, do you have a life expectancy for this new one?
I'd have to read the spec on the product that Westfall will be proposing. That information.
And one thing just to note, the significant change in this as well is the approach to lighting in the gym. Right now, it's either on or off. And they're on all day long, and they're on all night long, and they're on 7 days a week. So our gyms are used extensively, and so there is a fundamental change that's being proposed here. If you can see scene programming with 5 push button switches to allow zoning in the field house. So the approach of like turning the whole thing on all day, this is a huge change in thought process. And like I mentioned, like if a new gym was going in today, this is the technology that would be used. It's zoning it, so it's not just all on for like 16 hours.
Which is the case, most likely that Heritage Darwin's gonna be.
Yes, so this is just a better overall approach, but we will follow up and get that additional information. This is a larger project. We also have on the list some pool maintenance that was necessary for the UV system that we put in place. There was some just maintenance requirements to keep that system functional.
You will notice we do have a little bit of a larger project for athletics. We want to get the varsity softball infield up to standard, as well as the JV baseball. So Nick has quotes on both of those to bring those areas up to where we would view as a standard for both of those. We do have some card readers. So the one thing that I'll mention, Dr. Brown's welcome to comment on this. She did notice upon entry into the district that the safety and security at the middle school entrance was a concern. I know she's talked to the board about this. Jack, you had feedback on trying to look for more of a technological solution instead of like a personnel-based solution. That's what this is. So John did some work with into this topic to bring forward more of a technological solution as opposed to like a personnel. That's what that one is. We do have at the TLC an instructor request based on the use of the building to remove 2 walls in the northeast corner to expand the student classroom space. The dishwasher at the high school is at its last leg, so to speak. Now, keep in mind that's original to the addition. So the addition to the high school was in 2004. So that's about 20 years of a product there. So it's definitely getting to the end of its life cycle. And at the high school, the cart that they use to move equipment throughout the high school site went out. We have a quote from Stotts to replace it. They've given us a discount off of that price for the school district, and that's what you're seeing there. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have on this list or get additional information for you. But these are the items that we were looking to move forward to the next board meeting.
So I guess one of the things when you look at the demo of TLC, is this, as you start planning for the use of the middle school, would some of these classes potentially go over there? Is it
All part of the conversation. I'm not sure that we're in a position to answer that question. Just
Well, we may not be in a position to answer it,
consideration,
but
sure.
when we sit here, we're gonna spend this type of money here, which obviously is a small amount compared to the overall budget, but is it something you can live with for another year?
So is the space they want to take out kind of where they have more of a meeting lunchroom space where students really don't go into? When I look at the configuration of that TLC, John or Steve, do you know what wall they want to
Scott, no.
or Scott? Are they taking out and trying to make theirs?
You walk in up top on the left-hand door. Do you ever go in that left-hand door?
Yeah.
There's the 2 classrooms.
Yeah.
It's this classroom, and there's a wall that comes up like this, and it creates a interior closet area for the other room. So they would take that, them 2 walls off, and get rid of the closet. The teachers in there say they need the space.
And they are very tight. They have, I've been over them, they have very tight conditions.
May I ask a question on this one? I'm not sure if EUA has been tasked with finding out, along with our high school renovations that we're thinking about, what the future is of that building. Because we put a lot of money into maintaining that building. It's challenging, stick frame building, maintained with its roof, and it's older, and so just want to throw out there. Not sure if EUA is working out with the future of that building may look like with us. So
That's part of the conversation. when we went over to Middleton, to visit their site, while ours is offsite in another building, theirs is connected to their high school. And so that's what I mean when I say up for consideration, because there is an opportunity for us to explore, not having our offsite location, but bringing the students to the fold. As we think about what our new high school will look like moving forward. Their setup was, I thought it was very nice because the students are still part of the school system or the school building. And I talked to Dana about it a little bit and it works very well for them. In terms of supervision, FTEs and so on. So it's definitely part of our conversation moving forward, but I think it's a great question.
Yeah, and I respect the, you know, your thoughts on that. But, you know, it's just, you know, we're nickeling and diming.
Trying to hold it up.
Trying to kind of hold it up. Is there, you know, if we understand that this is the plan, you know, and it's only a 2-year, 18-month situation that we're going to live with. It's,
Yeah, Scott's closer to the request, so I haven't spoken with the teacher making the request, nor do I know the impact if we go with it without, so I imagine.
Not really related on those lines, but more philosophically about this whole idea of these contingency funds and what to do with them going forward. I mean, I get the heritage thing and putting another entrance in there. That's really within the scope of that project that we asked money for, that we got on it. If I think about it just from a real simple level, I asked someone for this much money to do this thing. Great. You always hear about, you asked for it. What, did you use it all? Or if you didn't use it all, did you get it back? So I think it's a really goodwill thing to, if we didn't use this money, all right, you guys, you give them the option of like, we're going to give it back to you. And it's kind of like, oh, or you just make it well known that this is what we did with the money. We completed it. These are, and somehow I'll say we need, or we're looking to do these additional things too. I don't know how that's done, but I think it's that's a responsible thing to get back to your distinction, the people that you're representing. So, and instead of just getting, oh, we got all this money, now let's try to do all of these things too.
correct.
Yeah, it's a great discussion, Ted, because we will absolutely want to have that once you as a board can see the exact final numbers for Heritage. And it's a great discussion to have, because whether the board chooses to lower the tax levy for the community in Fund 39, which is a choice, or short borrow, which is another choice, or utilize the funds, or a blend of those, absolutely, it's a great conversation to have, because the community will want to know what decisions are being made with those taxpayer funds. And it's not a decision we're going to try to ask you to like make at the moment. You'll have time to think about it and plan for it. And it absolutely can be a hybrid. So depending on what the goals of the board are, we can give you a variety of options. We'll just want to factor that into the discussion with the budget committee about the remaining borrowing, because if there's an interest in the board looking at that from a borrowing lens, we don't want to borrow all of it, and then that option goes away.
And I was the new kid on the block still a little bit. Just thinking about, whatever that list is, that we would share with our community in terms of what we've done. Is to prioritize safety and security in some of the spaces. As I continue to walk around, just kind of see, where maybe we need more surveillance, or maybe there's some blind spots that we hadn't seen or hadn't thought about for various reasons. I would like for the board to consider, the safety and security, prioritizing that as we move down the list. Now, if a dishwasher breaks or a refrigerator breaks, we have to keep the food cool. Then that's a different conversation, but I would like for us to consider that to be a priority, whatever we decide to come up with moving forward. As I'm having conversations with superintendents across Dane County, safety, we're all thinking about how do we, safety is always on a cycle of continuous improvement. cycle of continuous improvement. So I would just like for us to prioritize that when we can and where we can.
Understood.
Thank you.
What do you need a motion on this? Motion to approve as presented.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Thanks for your time this
Thank you
morning.
very much. So we are ready to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.